We cannot long endure this suffering, Master Bradford. The sickness takes me each day. We are honored by your presence, great Sachem. We offer what we have. May this meal find favor with you and your warriors.
Stop scrolling. Your Thanksgiving dinner is built on the biggest lie in American history. Here's what's going to destroy everything you think you know. The Pilgrims. They didn't have a Thanksgiving feast. The Native Americans. They weren't invited guests. That heartwarming story about cooperation and gratitude, it's complete fiction designed to hide the most horrific survival story in American colonial history. Picture this. November 1620. 202 English passengers land at Plymouth Rock after 66 days of hell at sea. Half of them will be dead within 4 months. But here's what nobody tells you. They didn't land at Plymouth by choice. They were supposed to land in Virginia. They got lost. They were starving. They were desperate. And what happened next makes the Hunger Games look like a children's story. I want you to imagine something. It's February 1621. You're a pilgrim mother. You haven't eaten real food in 3 days. Your children are crying from hunger. Your husband died 2 weeks ago from disease. And you're looking at his body, thinking about things no human should ever think about. Because here's what they don't teach you in school. The Pilgrims resorted to cannibalism. They ate the dead to survive. Real people, real families, real desperation. But wait. It gets absolutely insane. The first Thanksgiving you know about, it happened because the Pilgrims had just finished a war. Not a celebration, a war. They weren't thanking God for the harvest. They were thanking God for helping them massacre an entire Native American village. And here's the part that's going to make you question everything. The Native Americans at the first Thanksgiving, they weren't guests. They were prisoners of war. Stop. Let that sink in. Every single Thanksgiving image you've ever seen, pilgrims and Indians sharing food in harmony, is depicting a hostage situation. But the real story is so much worse than that. Here's what actually happened in 1621. The Pilgrims invited the Wampanoag chief Massasoit to a feast. When he arrived with 90 warriors, the Pilgrims realized they were outnumbered. They panicked. They served food that was barely edible, leftovers, scraps, whatever they could find. It wasn't gratitude. It was terror. The Pilgrims were afraid the Native Americans were going to kill them all. But here's what's going to destroy your childhood. That famous image of Pilgrims and Indians sitting around a table together. It never happened, ever, at any point in history. The two groups ate separately. They didn't share food. They didn't pray together. They barely spoke to each other. The Pilgrims thought the Native Americans were demons sent by Satan. The Native Americans thought the Pilgrims were diseased refugees who smelled terrible. Think about your last Thanksgiving dinner. Your family sitting around the table, talking about gratitude, sharing what they're thankful for. Now imagine finding out that everything you're celebrating is based on genocide, cannibalism, and cultural destruction. Because that's exactly what happened. Let me take you back to the real Plymouth. Winter 1620-1621. The Mayflower is anchored offshore because the Pilgrims are too weak to build proper housing. Picture this hell. Families living in holes dug into hillsides, covered with branches and dirt. No heat, no adequate food. Diseases spreading through camps like wildfire. People are dying so fast they can't dig graves fast enough. Here's what they don't tell you in elementary school. William Bradford, the Plymouth governor, wrote in his diary about the living barely being able to bury the dead. But he left out the worst part. Archaeological evidence from Plymouth shows cut marks on human bones consistent with cannibalism. The Pilgrims were literally eating each other to survive. And this is what your Thanksgiving celebrates. But the Pilgrims' survival came at a cost that's going to make you sick. The land they settled on. It wasn't empty wilderness. It was recently cleared farmland belonging to the Patuxet tribe. Want to know why it was empty? European diseases had killed 90% of the Patuxet population just 3 years before the Pilgrims arrived. The Pilgrims literally built their colony on top of a Native American graveyard. Here's something that's going to change how you see everything. Squanto, that friendly Native American who supposedly helped the Pilgrims. He spoke English because he had been kidnapped by European slave traders, sold into slavery in Spain, escaped to London, and somehow made his way back to America to find his entire tribe dead from disease. He wasn't helping the Pilgrims out of kindness. He was the sole survivor of genocide, trying to prevent his complete cultural extinction. By 1621, the Pilgrims weren't planning Thanksgiving feasts. They were planning military campaigns. The peace with Native Americans lasted exactly long enough for the Pilgrims to recover their strength and obtain more colonists from England. Then they started systematic campaigns to eliminate every Native American tribe in New England. But here's the part that's going to make you understand how evil this gets. The Pilgrims developed a strategy that would define American expansion for the next 300 years. They would invite Native American leaders to friendship feasts, then massacre entire villages while the leaders were away. This wasn't just war. This was psychological torture, designed to break Native American resistance through terror. The first Thanksgiving wasn't about gratitude. It was about establishing a pattern of deception that would be used to commit genocide across the entire continent. Here's what's going to blow your mind. The modern Thanksgiving myth was invented in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War as propaganda to convince Americans that their country was founded on peaceful cooperation instead of genocide and cannibalism. It was literally designed to make you feel good about American expansion by hiding the truth about how it started. Think about every elementary school play you ever saw about Thanksgiving. Little kids dressed as pilgrims and Indians, sharing plastic food, talking about friendship and cooperation. Those teachers knew they were lying to you. The real story has been available in historical records for 400 years. William Bradford wrote about it. Native American oral traditions preserved it. Archaeologists have proved it. But America decided you couldn't handle the truth. Here's what's going to ruin your next family gathering. When your relatives start talking about what they're grateful for, remember that you're celebrating a holiday based on cannibalism, genocide, cultural destruction, systematic deception, educational propaganda. Your grandmother's turkey recipe is seasoned with lies. But the Plymouth horror story was just the beginning. The template established by the Pilgrims, invite Native Americans to peace talks, then massacre their villages, was used hundreds of times across American expansion. Every westward expansion, every Indian treaty, every peaceful negotiation, they all followed the Plymouth model: deception, massacre, land theft, myth creation. Here's something that's going to make you see current events differently. The same psychological techniques used to turn genocidal cannibals into heroic religious refugees are still being used today. Every time a government wants to justify violence, they create heartwarming myths about their founding principles. Every time a society wants to cover up systematic oppression, they invent stories about cooperation and mutual benefit. Let me ask you something. If the real story of Plymouth is this horrific, what other heartwarming American origin stories are actually covering up atrocities? The Boston Tea Party? The Revolutionary War? Manifest Destiny? How many of your patriotic beliefs are built on carefully constructed lies designed to make you feel good about systematic violence? Here's proof you can't argue with. Modern excavations at Plymouth have found human bones with cut marks indicating cannibalism, Native American skeletons showing signs of violent death, European weapons mixed with Native American remains, evidence of burned Native American structures under Pilgrim buildings. The physical evidence proves the horror story is real and the heartwarming story is fiction. But here's what's going to break your heart. Modern Native American communities still observe November as a day of mourning for the genocide that began with Plymouth. While you're eating turkey and talking about gratitude, Native American families are holding ceremonies to remember ancestors who were systematically murdered, deceived, and culturally destroyed. Your celebration is their trauma anniversary. Let me give you details that are going to haunt your dreams. William Bradford's diary describes pilgrims being forced to make use of that which nature abhors, a 17th century way of saying they ate human flesh. Archaeological analysis shows evidence of systematic butchering of human remains for food preparation. These weren't isolated incidents of desperation. This was organized survival cannibalism, involving entire families making collective decisions to consume the dead. Here's something that's going to make you understand how evil gets justified. The Pilgrims convinced themselves that cannibalism and genocide were part of God's plan. They believed Native Americans were literally demons placed on earth to test Pilgrim faith. They thought cannibalism was acceptable because they were God's chosen people in a wilderness filled with Satan's representatives. Religion didn't prevent the horror. Religion justified the horror. But the Pilgrims had help in their genocide campaign. European diseases killed 90% of New England Native Americans before the Pilgrims even arrived. Smallpox, typhus, bubonic plague, biological weapons more effective than any military strategy. The Pilgrims didn't conquer the wilderness. They inherited a post-apocalyptic landscape created by European biological warfare, but they still managed to make it worse. Remember Squanto, the friendly Indian who helped the Pilgrims? Here's his real story. Kidnapped by European slave traders in 1614, sold into slavery in Spain, escaped to London, worked for years to earn passage back to America, arrived in 1619 to find his entire tribe dead from European diseases. Squanto helped the Pilgrims because he was the only person left alive who knew how to survive in his homeland. He was a genocide survivor, trying to prevent complete cultural extinction. So how did America transform this horror story into a heartwarming holiday? Step 1. Ignore all historical evidence about cannibalism and genocide. Step 2. Invent a fictional feast based on no historical records. Step 3. Teach the fictional version to children as historical fact. Step 4. Repeat the lie for 160 years until people believe it's true. It's the most successful propaganda campaign in American history. Every elementary school teacher who ever taught you about Thanksgiving knew they were lying. The real historical records are available in any library. The archaeological evidence is published in academic journals. The Native American oral traditions have never changed. But America decided that children couldn't handle the truth about their country's founding. So they created an elaborate fictional mythology and called it history education. Think about your family's Thanksgiving traditions. Going around the table sharing gratitude, watching football games, eating turkey with traditional sides, telling stories about American history. Every single tradition is built on covering up genocide, cannibalism, and cultural destruction. Your family bonding is happening over the celebration of systematic violence. Here's what modern Native Americans want you to know. November is National Native American Heritage Month. But it's also the month when their ancestors began experiencing systematic genocide that continued for 300 years. Thanksgiving for them isn't about gratitude. It's about survival. Survival of culture, language, identity, and communities despite 400 years of systematic attempts at complete elimination. Here's what learning this truth does to your brain. It forces you to question every other heartwarming American story you've been told. If Plymouth is a lie, what about the Boston Tea Party, Washington crossing the Delaware, the Underground Railroad, Ellis Island immigration stories? How many of your patriotic beliefs are carefully constructed myths covering up systematic violence? Continuing deception patterns, 15-15-45. The Plymouth deception model is still being used today. Government violence justified through humanitarian language. Systematic oppression described as mutual cooperation. Cultural destruction presented as modernization and progress. Historical truth suppressed to maintain comfortable mythologies. Every time you see a heartwarming story about American expansion, remember Plymouth. So what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to keep participating in Thanksgiving celebrations based on genocide and cannibalism? Are you going to keep teaching your children fictional stories about Pilgrim Indian cooperation? Are you going to keep pretending that heartwarming lies are better than horrific truths? Here's the choice every American faces. Option 1. Keep believing comfortable lies about your country's founding, even though you now know they're false. Option 2. Accept that American expansion was built on systematic genocide, cultural destruction, and carefully constructed mythologies designed to hide the truth. Most people choose option 1 because option 2 is psychologically unbearable. But here's what understanding Plymouth teaches you. Every empire in human history has created heartwarming mythologies to justify systematic violence. The Romans had civilizing missions. The British had white man's burden. The Americans have manifest destiny and spreading democracy. Plymouth shows you the template. Commit atrocities, create myths, teach myths as history, repeat until people believe the myths are more real than the truth. The battle over Thanksgiving is actually a war for control of cultural memory. On one side, historical truth about genocide, cannibalism, and systematic deception. On the other side, comfortable mythology about cooperation, gratitude, and peaceful coexistence. Winner determines how Americans understand their relationship with violence, expansion, and cultural destruction. This isn't just about one historical event. This is about whether truth or comfort determines cultural identity. Here's something that's going to make you see family dynamics differently. Every Thanksgiving celebration continues the trauma inflicted on Native American communities 400 years ago. Every year, American families gather to celebrate the beginning of systematic genocide, while Native American families hold ceremonies to mourn the loss of ancestors, land, and culture. Your family tradition is their intergenerational trauma. You now have information that changes everything. You can't unknow that Thanksgiving celebrates cannibalism and genocide. You can't pretend that the Pilgrim Indian cooperation story is true. You can't participate in family traditions without knowing they're built on systematic violence. So what are you going to do? Keep participating in the lie. Change how you observe November? Educate others about the truth? Your choice determines whether the Plymouth deception continues for another generation. But here's the ultimate truth that's going to stay with you forever. Plymouth proves that human beings will believe any lie, no matter how obviously false, if the lie makes them feel better about systematic violence they benefit from. Americans know that Plymouth colonization involved violence against Native Americans, but they choose to believe in fictional feast stories because the truth requires admitting that their country was founded on genocide, cannibalism, and cultural destruction. The lie is more psychologically comfortable than the truth. Standing in Plymouth today, you can visit the Mayflower 2 replica and see reenactors dressed as pilgrims talking about religious freedom and cooperation with Native Americans. But you can't visit memorials to the Patuxet people whose land the Pilgrims stole, whose bodies the Pilgrims built over, whose culture the Pilgrims systematically destroyed. You can buy Thanksgiving decorations celebrating fictional friendship, but you can't find educational materials about 400 years of systematic genocide that began at Plymouth Rock. The mythology has become more powerful than the history. But now you know the truth. Every Thanksgiving dinner, every elementary school play, every heartwarming story about American founding. Remember Plymouth. Remember that comfortable lies about cooperation and gratitude are covering up cannibalism, genocide, and systematic cultural destruction. Remember that your country was built on violence, not virtue. And ask yourself, if they lied about Plymouth, what else are they lying about? That's all for our journey through the real Plymouth story. But before you go, look at your calendar. November is coming, and now you'll never see Thanksgiving the same way again. If there's another heartwarming American story that's actually covering up systematic violence, another myth that needs destroying, another truth that Americans aren't ready to hear, let me know in the comments. Because the real lesson of Plymouth isn't that the Pilgrims were evil. It's that every society tells itself beautiful lies about its own violence. And the more beautiful the lie, the more horrific the truth it's hiding.